is Brent Neiman. He's an economist and former Treasury official in the Biden administration. His research was cited by the Trump White House, really to help them justify the reciprocal tariff rates. So they said, look at this research, look at this. This is where we get this crucial number that gets us to these stratospheric tariff rates. So, Brent, I really appreciate your taking the time here. I just want to start off with you because we've got the math, and I've spent a lot of today. I've got my, going through the math. Sorry, I'm just holding it up for people that we were going through. So you see these high tariff rates, and Trump sitting there on the screen, and it's scrolling by country after country after country, and you see your works used to justify them. What did you think in that moment?
Yeah, thanks, Erin, for having me on the show. On Wednesday of last week, I was in a University of Chicago macroeconomics seminar, and my phone started blowing up with those pictures of the president in the Rose Garden with that screen with really big numbers and many more countries listed than I thought. And so with apologies to the speaker, I couldn't really focus. And then the next day, I woke up and there was a bunch of emails from journalists in my inbox, and a former colleague had posted that they released the methodology explaining what they had done to calculate these tariffs. And they had cited, not many papers, and one of them was a paper I wrote together with Alberto Cavallo, Gita Gopinath, and Jenny Tang. So I started digging in and looking at, how my work could have possibly informed this policy, which I really think is a terrible policy. So I ended up writing an op-ed on it, and I think it's been well received so far.
All right, so you're shocked because you couldn't understand how your work could be used in this way. I just want to ask you though, because there's how your work was used incorrectly, and then there's the premise of what they've done. The premise of what they have done basically is, as you've described it, do unto others as they do unto you, right? That they, that the way they define reciprocal, the premise that they have approached this with. Do you support that, just on its base, forgetting the math that they use? Do you support their logic?
Well, they build it as a reciprocal tariff. So what I was expecting is that they would look at what other countries charge as tariffs to the United States, and if they're 2, 3, 4 percentage points higher, we might try to bridge that gap with a reciprocal tariff of our own. Maybe they would look also at non-tariff barriers, et cetera, but they did nothing of the sort. The main issue with these tariffs is that they define them such that they would eliminate bilateral trade deficits between the United States and every trade partner that we have in the world, one by one, where we run deficits. And once you make that the goal of the policy, it's over, you're done. Whatever formula you come up with and whatever numbers you plug into that formula, you're not going to get a good trade policy. You're instead going to come up with something that can do real harm to Americans and I think to the whole world.
Right, and that's the basic, just to say to people that there might be a country, I know, you and I were talking earlier about examples, say Sri Lanka, where Americans buy a lot of clothes, but Sri Lanka does not buy a lot of gas turbines, for example, right? That's not a trade imbalance that would need to be corrected, right? But they're approaching it as if it is.
Right. I mean, I certainly expected, frankly, that China would be on the list, maybe even Europe. But I was surprised to see, like you said, Sri Lanka, Jordan is on the list, Zambia is on the list, and the reason is just because we happen to buy a lot of textiles and jewelry and coffee from those countries, and they don't buy that much high-tech equipment or gas turbines, like you said. And so, yeah, I think it's a mistaken philosophy to even try to calculate reciprocal tariffs the way that the way that they did. And then from then on, frankly, the more I looked into it, there was what I would characterize as a cascade of mistakes, making these tariffs even broader and even bigger.
So let's talk about that cascade, because it comes down to the equation. They put this equation out that looks like it could have come from Einstein. And this complicated equation, we'll throw it up. I mean, this is the sort of stuff, I don't know, you would see in econometrics or something like that, but it's a very fancy looking equation. It essentially boils down to, you're going to take the difference between the exports and imports of a country, right? And you're going to calculate your tariffs based off of that. That's the essential thing. And then just your bottom line on this formula, is it good or no?
Yeah, so the formula is definitely not good. You know, that was the point I was making, is even the derivation of the formula, no matter what they do with it, I think it is not good trade policy. But they went further. You know, you do still have to plug some numbers into it.
So let's do that. Okay, because I said, hold on while you're
Sure.
talking here, I said I had my sheet, so I put it on a whiteboard. As you and I discussed, I might try to do, just to try to make sense of it, okay? So this is where we are, all right? We took Japan, because Trump's been talking a lot about Japan, Brent. You went through Japan. So he got a 46% tariff. That day when he stood up there, 46% came up. So I've got the numbers here, the difference between the exports and imports. I filled in all the numbers. There's one number here, though, I'm going to put in red. That is 0.25. That's your number. That's the number. Well, that's the number they say is your number, right? And when you take that number, that's the magic number, I put it in red, and you plug it into their equation, you get 46%.
Well, close, but not quite. The number that we would put, that I would put, based on my research in for that value, is 0.95.
Okay.
And that differs from the one that they used, like you said, which was 0.25. You know, the difference is almost a factor of 4.
Yep. So you put 0.95, then what happens to the 46?
Right. So, you know, if you change a number in the denominator, the bottom part of the fraction, by a factor of 4, you're going to reduce the equation, the left-hand side, the tariff, by a factor of 4. So specifically, you know, when Trump held up that sign and it had a 46 for Japan, you know, if you instead used 0.95, which is what I think my research motivates, you know, you'd get a number like 12%, much, much lower than 46%. And it doesn't even have to be that extreme. If you picked a number like 3, you'd still go down to 15%, you know, much, much lower. And the other thing I did want to just mention, because, you know, you said they got that 25 from you. To be clear, I don't know where they got that 0.25.
Right.
And
well,
what
they say
I
they
find
got it from you. I
astounding-
should have been more accurate there, yeah.
Well, not quite. I mean, it's, you know, this is an unbelievably consequential policy. I mean, I listened to the guests in your interview just now. You know, markets are moving tremendously. I mean, this is a really, really consequential policy for the world, for the country, for everyone. And yet the whole methodology explaining how they did this is, you know, a couple pages long, and I can't answer that question. I've had colleagues saying, what is that 0.25 number? And, you know, for instance, I don't even know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, you talk about, literally you could have things like war and peace depending on it. I mean, you go from 46 to 12 and do Trump's math and take half, you'd be looking at 6% instead of 24. I mean, it is just absolutely stunning to think about that. And I think so important that you say all of that, a lot of it could come down to this one number, your number, that's just, who knows where the heck it came from. I mean, it's stunning. Brent, I really appreciate your time and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Erin.